Welcome to this last video in this series on how to use your Navigator 6. This video is all about using the Navigator on the bike, and I'm going to just focus on some of the sort of tips and tricks and some of the sort of weird behaviors that sometimes the Nav throws up and how to get around them. So this is not a comprehensive guide to every feature on the Nav 6. Let's start with just a recap. So what I've done for this is I've planned my route in Reva, and I used the Butler graded roads to sort of pick a nice route through some quite scenic routes in Austin. Then what I've done is I've saved that as a track, and once that's saved as a track, I've gone into Basecamp and I've dragged that track in. So I've now got my track in Basecamp. The next thing I did was convert that track to a route, and there's a whole video on how to do that. And now that I've got that route created, I can actually send both the track and the route to my Garmin unit. So I'm plugging it in to my USB port. I'm waiting for the nav to show up in the top left corner, and once it finishes syncing, I can select that list and I can say, right, send routes, tracks and waypoints to the Nav 6. Usually the transfer is pretty quick. Once I disconnect the Nav 6, it sort of reboots, and you'll see it says it's found new routes, import them. So I'll say yes. And there's the one I just created. So I select that and import that. And now I've got my route and my track and my waypoints on my Nav 6. So the first thing, if you have a look at the trip planner, you can see the trip is featured, ready to ride. Now what I'm going to show you is how to actually enable the track on the map as well. And even though I'm using a route, I like to have the track displayed, and you'll see why later on when we ride this. So if I select tracks, here are all the tracks I've got loaded on my GPS, and if I scroll down to the bottom, there's my track which I just created, the Nav 6 tutorial. So if I highlight it, it's now displayed on the map, and if I click the little wrench in the top left corner, I want to check that box which says show it on the map. And you can adjust the color. So for now, I'll just leave it as green. And I'm going to save that. And now, if I view the map and I just zoom out, you'll see that track is actually displayed all the time on the map, whether I'm navigating or not. Okay, so time to ride the route, and I usually go out and get a satellite lock first. I'm going to train a GoPro onto the nav screen to make it easier to see what's happening. First thing to point out is to enable the controls to control the navigation unit, you just press and hold the menu button for a few seconds until the nav lights up in the top left of your LCD screen. Now the jog wheel will control the nav zoom levels. And you can see my green track on the map that I set last night. What I'm going to do now, I'm in the light, the green is not standing out as easily as it could, so I'm actually going to change the color of that track to something that's a bit easier for me to see in the daylight. So I'm going to go back into my apps, back into tracks. I'm going to find that track again, which is at the bottom, nav tutorial, and hit the spanner, and now I'm going to just change that color to something that pops a bit more. And it was interesting, last night the green was fine, but in the daylight I just found it wasn't showing as well. So now my track is red. Okay, now that the nav's set up, all I've got to do is start my trip. So if I go to my trip planner, there's my trip at the top. So if I click on that, now I made a mistake here. You should really just review the information on the screen, and had I done that, I would have noticed a mistake. If you see in the top right corner, it actually says distance 625 kilometers and travel time 7 hours 30 minutes. That's incorrect. It was actually about a 2.5 or 3 hour trip that I planned. Now it's asking me for which waypoint I'd like to go to first. Now here, if the first waypoint is where I am, you should select the second waypoint. But because when I designed the trip, it's starting about 35 minutes away from me, I'm going to select the first one, which is the nav tutorial start. Now it calculates the route, and again, I should have just checked this map more thoroughly, and I would have seen that it's a bit weird. Something was flaky on it. And if you have a look in the bottom dashboard there, you can see it says 663 kilometers arriving at 3 p.m. So I didn't spot that then, but that's a really good habit to get into, just to make sure that the calculation is correct. So I'm off and running now, and I'm navigating, and when I was on the road and I looked down, I did actually spot the problem. So I pulled in, and I just wanted to point out one thing which some people don't realize. The whole unit is designed to tilt on that bar so that when you're on the pegs, you can actually see the screen standing up. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to go in and change the calculation mode. So I've gone into settings, calculation, and instead of saying faster time, I don't know why it's flaky, but I'm just choosing shorter distance. Now if I go back to my map, view the map, if you look down the bottom corner, you just see that it just updated the arrival time and the distance to something that was much more appropriate. So I'm just zooming out, double checking that the map looks good, and it does, so I can get on my way again. So I'm heading off now to my first waypoint. And as I approach the waypoint, forget all of those little hearts. They're just my previous waypoints showing up as favorites, but I want you to look at the number in the top left corner. It's counting down to the waypoint, and as I go past it, it automatically flips to my next waypoint. I'm going to stop in here and just fuel up, and then head off on my trip. So now I'm off and running. I'm enjoying my route. I can see I've got about 14 kilometers before my next waypoint, so I can just settle in and enjoy the trip, enjoy the scenery. Okay, so I'm now approaching another waypoint, which is Johnson City, and as I get through town, coming out of town, I'm going to demonstrate a couple of things for you on the nav. The first is I'm going to set a deliberate sort of detour. So imagine a road is blocked, whether it's through flooding, etc. I'm going to turn left here into this little road, and then I'm going to pull over. And my normal route is straight ahead, but let's assume that that's impassable for some reason. So I'm just going to pull over to the side of the road, and I'm going to tell the unit that I need a detour. So if I click the little menu in the bottom right, and then just tap on the detour button, the nav will reroute me around that road in front. So you can see it's now telling me to take a U-turn. So I'm going to do my U-turn, and then as the nav sort of straightens up, I'm just going to have a look at the route that it's suggesting for me. So it wants me to go left, and if I zoom out, yeah, you can see that looks like it's heading back to where I need to go. So the detour looks good at this stage. I'll show you another thing that the nav sometimes does. So it's telling me to turn left a bit further ahead, but sometimes the road it wants you to take is not a good road. So if you look to the left, it wanted me to go up that road, and that's actually a private property. And in Texas, it's not wise to actually go up private property. They like their guns way too much. So you can see now the nav is sort of recalculating, and it wants me to go back up that road that it's navigated. So if you zoom out, you can see what's going on. The nav is trying to take me back to that first waypoint, whereas I know that's a private road. So what I want to do is I actually want to tell the nav to skip that waypoint and go to the next one. So to do that, I just hit the button on the top right, which is skip to next waypoint, and you can see the nav recalculates. So now this road looks viable, so I'm going to turn off into this road, and I want to just now see, am I heading back on the right route? If we just pause it for a second, this is where having the track really helps whenever you do any sort of diversion, or if there's any sort of recalculation. So I can quite clearly see my original track coming in on the left on red, and now I can now see that I'm joining back up to that with my route in pink. I just want to pause it here for a second, because this is just a really good example of why planning your route on a tool like Rever really helps. I'm heading down this road, and there's a tiny little diversion off onto the left-hand side, which I never would have taken had I been just riding up the road. But as you can see, when I go down this little diversion, it actually takes me down by the river, which is pretty much hidden by the main road. And it gives me this gorgeous route down through this lovely sort of Texas hill country, streams and creeks and things like that. And I think that's the real benefit of planning your route rather than just going for a nice drive. You'd never find these sort of places. Another thing, if you twist the jog wheel rather than rolling it, you'll bring up an alternate menu. In this case, I brought up the compass, and the red arrow is pointing the way to the next waypoint, which can be quite useful. If I twist again, I get a menu. Generally, I only use this one for dropping waypoints if I see somewhere interesting. It'll put one onto the map. And then finally, this last menu is your data screens. And when this comes up, if you roll your jog wheel, it'll change between 16 pieces of data, 4 pieces of data, 2 pieces of data, or a single piece of data, and they're configurable. Anyway, that pretty much brings us to the end of this video. I hope you got at least 1 or 2 tips or tricks out of this that you hadn't discovered before. And I hope you enjoy the series about how to get the most out of your Nav 6. Thanks for watching.